On August 11th, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel, the 3104, accidentally collided with its own Navy's main ship, the 164, a Type 052DL destroyer named Guilin. The collision produced a loud crashing sound. From another angle, the head of the 3104 vessel was completely destroyed after the impact. After the crash, the 3104 vessel seemed to lose power and waited for rescue in place. The Philippine Coast Guard nearby recorded the scene. According to Philippine media, the incident occurred near Huangyan Island, while the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3104 was chasing a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. The 3104 accidentally collided with the Chinese Navy's destroyer. The Philippine Coast Guard immediately offered assistance. A spokesperson for the Philippine Coast Guard said the incident took place about 10.5 nautical miles east of Huangyan Island. The two vessels involved were the Chinese Navy's 164 and the Chinese Coast Guard's 3104. At the time, the Philippine Coast Guard was escorting a ship delivering supplies to local fishermen. The Chinese Coast Guard initially used water cannons to attack the Philippine vessel, but the Philippines successfully avoided the attack. The Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3104 then pursued the Philippine Suluan patrol boat at high speeds and made an unsafe maneuver from the right stern of the Philippine ship, leading to the collision with the Chinese Navy ship. According to Tarriela, the collision caused severe damage to the bow of the Chinese Coast Guard vessel, rendering it unable to navigate. After the collision, the Pacific Coast Guard immediately provided support, including rescuing people who fell overboard and offering medical assistance. On social media, some people mocked the Chinese military, saying they wanted to crash into others but ended up colliding with their own. They hurt themselves. This combat ability is really weak, and their equipment is probably made of tofu. The incident reflects significant issues with the Chinese naval team's cooperative combat system. There are also technical shortcomings in Beidou navigation and distance measurement. A video shared on social media celebrated the Philippine Coast Guard sailors, praising their excellent sailing skills and calm demeanor as they outsmarted the two larger Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea. On August 11th, around 1 p.m., the Chinese Coast Guard issued a statement through their spokesperson, Gan Yu, claiming, "On August 11th, the Philippines organized multiple Coast Guard and government ships under the pretext of supplying fishing boats, ignoring China's repeated warnings and entering Chinese waters near Huangyan Island." The Chinese Coast Guard issued a press release stating that it took necessary actions, including monitoring, forced outer pressure, and blocking control, to expel the Philippine vessel according to the law. However, the press release did not mention the collision incident reported by Philippine media. As of the time of publication, neither the Chinese Ministry of Defense nor the Southern Theater Command of the Chinese military had issued any comments. Huangyan Island is one of the hotspots in the South China Sea sovereignty dispute between China and the Philippines. China claims sovereignty over most of the South China Sea, disregarding the international court's ruling that its position is baseless. Huangyan Island is located 100 nautical miles from the Philippines' Subic Bay and 500 nautical miles from Hainan Island. China, the Philippines, and the Republic of China all claim sovereignty over the island, which is currently under Chinese control. It is administratively part of Shansha City, Hainan Province, and is patrolled by the Chinese Coast Guard. The collision is the latest in a series of confrontations between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea. Public records show that after the 2013 State Council reform, the Chinese Coast Guard absorbed the ships of the Maritime Safety Administration, Fisheries Administration, and Anti-Smuggling Bureau. Since 2018, it has been under the control of the Armed Police Forces, and by the end of 2023, it claimed to have 120 vessels of over 1,000 tons for law enforcement. The Chinese Coast Guard also boasts two of the world's largest patrol vessels, Haijian 2901 and Haijian 5901. They operate in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. However, the Chinese Coast Guard has several weaknesses. Compared to Japan's Coast Guard, China's Coast Guard lacks a sufficient number of trained personnel to operate its new ships. These new Chinese vessels also suffer from maintenance issues and poor construction. In recent years, there have been continuous conflicts between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea. While China has emphasized the number of tons its Coast Guard vessels carry, these vessels are particularly vulnerable to collisions. For example, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3104 was badly damaged when it collided with its own Navy's destroyer. Similarly, on March 23, 2024, at the second Thomas Shoal, also known as the Renai Reef in Chinese and the Ayungin Reef in the Philippines, A Chinese Coast Guard vessel attacked a Philippine supply ship with water cannons. During the incident, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 4103 was also damaged by the Philippine patrol vessel. It was left with several holes. Chinese netizens criticized this, saying it wasn't very harmful, but it was very humiliating, questioning the durability of Chinese vessels and their defects. After the incident, Chinese media had to bring in military experts to justify the situation, including claims that the focus on armor and military resistance for maneuverability was unrealistic, and some even argued that the damage to the ships had nothing to do with their quality. Military expert Yang Xianji pointed out that the Philippine patrol boat, which had not been modified, was able to create holes in the Chinese warship's iron hull just from unintentional inertia during a collision. This should not just be seen as a disgrace, but rather a warning. It essentially signals that Chinese warships are not sturdy. A deliberate high-speed collision could cause severe damage and even paralyze their combat capabilities. This provides a reasonable explanation for why the Chinese Coast Guard accused the Philippines of using armed fishermen. If the bow of a Philippine fishing boat were equipped with a harder iron shell, it's possible that anyone could have caused a significant hole in the Chinese Coast Guard vessel. China defends itself, claiming that due to the different enforcement targets, larger ships like the 10,000 class Coast Guard vessels and a 2,000-ton 718B class and the 3,000-ton 818 class are already under construction. They're all equipped with enhanced armor. This future capability could mean the Coast Guard won't fear such collisions, which indirectly admits that the current Chinese Coast Guard vessels are vulnerable. The Chinese Navy's Type 052DL destroyer Guilin, which was hit by the Chinese Coast Guard vessel, was built by Jiangnan Shipyard. Recently, many senior officials in China's military-industrial system have fallen from power. The Chinese shipbuilding group, responsible for producing warships at Jiangnan Shipyard, is a major corruption hotspot, and the two most recent chairmen, Lei Fanpei and Wen Gong, have been caught up in scandals. In June 2024, Li Chaokun, the former chairman of the China Shipbuilding Group's finance company, was investigated. Sources indicate that the case involved bribes from ship suppliers, leading to his investigation after the suppliers reported the issue. The corruption within China's military-industrial system, including the use of substandard materials, inevitably affects the quality of their products. While Chinese warships may be of poor quality, their ambitions are still substantial. In recent years, the Chinese Coast Guard's activities in East Asia and Southeast Asia have notably increased, as China tries to assert its sovereignty in disputed waters through aggressive tactics. This trend affects not only Taiwan, but also neighboring countries like Japan and the Philippines. China's frequent use of Coast Guard vessels to expand its maritime rights and engage in gray zone actions has attracted significant international attention. China continues to face disputes in the Indo-Pacific region. Tensions escalated following a conflict between the Philippine Navy and Chinese Coast Guard personnel in the South China Sea in 2024. According to the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, the United States is obligated to provide assistance if Philippine forces or ships in the Pacific region come under armed attack. Chinese Coast Guard vessels also frequently provoke Taiwan, intentionally entering the water surrounding Taiwan's outlying islands. In addition, on June 7, 2024, Japan's Coast Guard confirmed that 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels entered water near the Senkaku Islands, marking the first time they were spotted with what appeared to be machine guns. This incident undoubtedly heightened maritime tensions between China and Japan. New satellite images circulating on Chinese military forums indicated that the Jiangnan Shipyard in Shanghai might be constructing a new ship resembling the Chinese Navy's Type 052D destroyer. Compared to the 052D, this new vessel has left space for installing a naval gun, while the missile vertical launch system that was previously located behind the naval gun has disappeared. Multiple analyses suggest that this may be a Coast Guard vessel designed based on the body of a military ship, or simply a military ship converted into a Coast Guard vessel. Previously, China had used the Navy's 054A class frigate as a platform to create the 818 class patrol vessels for the Coast Guard. Between 2021 and 2022, China also converted 22 Type 056 missile destroyers into Coast Guard vessels. Taiwan's National Defense Security Research Institute director Su Ziyun stated that China has ambitions of shifting from land power to sea power, using both the Navy and Coast Guard as tools, one to seize maritime power, the other to manage it. However, China might also fear triggering a war, which makes the role of the Coast Guard more prominent. China may use these vessels to expand its actions in the gray zones outside the first island chain. This move by China could raise concerns among Indo-Pacific nations and escalate the arms race in the region. Another Taiwanese expert, Zhong Zhihong, pointed out that the United States long ago treated the Coast Guard and maritime militias, which are now under the Central Military Commission, as part of the Navy. He believes that China's biggest problem is that in the arms race, the US and other related nations may not necessarily fall behind in the future. If the US and regional countries take joint action to counter China's excessive territorial claims, such as forming alliances with Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines, China would face an unfavorable one-against-many situation. To counter China's threats and harassment, Japan has not only increased maritime cooperation with the US and South Korea, it has also provided the Philippines with large patrol ships and also plans to build 30,000-ton class super-large patrol vessels to create a maritime base in preparation for a possible Taiwan crisis. This news was reported by NHK in June 2023. In terms of naval forces, China currently has three major fleets: the South Sea Fleet, the East Sea Fleet, and the North Sea Fleet. The South Sea Fleet of the Chinese military is part of the Southern Theater Command. It's stationed in Zhanjiang, located on the southwestern side of Guangdong. The South China Sea, which this fleet patrols, is China's largest maritime area. It serves as China's sole maritime passage to the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and is a crucial route for U.S. aircraft carriers, making its location highly sensitive. Military author Shen Zhou stated that the Southern Theater Command's fleet has 4 055 destroyers and 9 052D destroyers, but these vessels cannot cross the Taiwan Strait to provide support. If China invades Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait will be under the control of land-based anti-ship missiles, making it extremely difficult for Chinese warships to pass. After the Shandong aircraft carrier fleet is destroyed, the remaining warships of the South Sea Fleet may hesitate to operate, as they could face airstrikes from U.S. bombers or ambushes from U.S. submarines, making it even harder to cross the Bashi Channel. Shenzhou also stated that the U.S. should send an aircraft carrier into the South China Sea, positioned to the west of the Spratly Islands just outside the operational range of Chinese fighter jets. This would allow it to coordinate with bombers to attack China's military islands in the South China Sea, and be prepared to ambush any Chinese fleets attempting to provide rescue. Even if the remaining Chinese warships stay in Sanya port, they would still be vulnerable to U.S. strikes. He argued that if China recklessly starts a war, it would not only lose its large amphibious assault ships, but also risk sinking its main warships. The U.S. military would likely not spare any remaining Chinese warships in port to ensure that China's Navy loses its offensive capabilities in the Western Pacific. The U.S. might also bomb shipyards like Dalian and Jiangnan in Shanghai, further crippling China's shipbuilding capabilities. After the defeat of China's Air Force, any remaining aircraft would likely flee to inland islands, but China's warships would have nowhere to hide and would likely be the first to fall. Military commentator Xu Ke pointed out that the recent collision between the Chinese Coast Guard vessel and its own Navy's warship may not only be due to technical issues, but could also be linked to instability within the Navy. On the surface, China's military appears strong, but internal strife within the Chinese Communist Party has dealt severe blows to the military, which is currently undergoing its most significant leadership crisis. Since 2023, dozens of senior military officers and executives in the defense industry have been investigated. Among the 7 seats of the Central Military Commission, which leads the military, 3 are effectively vacant due to members being arrested or going missing. Among the CMC members, former Defense Minister Li Shangfu was removed, and another key figure, General Miao Hua, who was responsible for political work, was investigated last year. The CMC's vice chairman, General He Weidong, has been absent from public events since mid-March of this year, signaling that he's either in trouble or under investigation. These individuals were all personally promoted by General Secretary Xi Jinping, with He Weidong and Miao Hua considered close confidants of Xi Jinping. Some analysts believe that this is part of Xi Jinping's purge of generals, while others think it's an internal cleansing by Zhang Youxia, another vice chairman of the CMC. Zhang is said to be consolidating military power. Regardless, external observers believe these internal conflicts will affect the morale of the military. The Navy has been a major focus of corruption, and the current wave of purges is primarily targeting this branch. Miao Hua, who was removed, was a Navy admiral. He served as the political commissar of the Chinese Navy from December 2014 to August 2017, during which time he promoted his allies and turned the Navy into his personal domain. After Miao Hua's downfall, those he promoted in the Navy are now fearful for their positions. Exiled liberal legal scholar Professor Yuan Hongbing revealed that after Miao Hua's arrest, he confessed to implicating a large number of Chinese military officers, causing widespread panic within the military. On July 31st of this year, the Ministry of Defense held a reception at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing to mark its 98th anniversary of the founding of the military. Compared to last year's reception, at least 7 current active duty admirals were missing, including the Navy's political commissar Yuan Huazhi. Li Pengcheng, the commander of the Navy in the Southern Theater Command, responsible for the South China Sea, was removed in December 2024. On March 15, 2025, the Navy in the Southern Theater Command made a rare announcement that a fighter jet had crashed near the town of Jiali in Lingao County, Hainan Province. This incident has been questioned in relation to instability within the military. On June 27th of this year, the Chief of Staff of the Navy, Li Hanjun, was confirmed to be under investigation. He had previously served as the head of the Navy Command Academy and was promoted to his position by Miao Hua. Recent foreign media reports, citing multiple experts, have analyzed that these purges could weaken military combat effectiveness, reduce trust in the command structure, and make Beijing more cautious about launching an attack on Taiwan. Moreover, the instability within the military could lead to a potential military coup. Independent commentator Du Zheng wrote earlier this year in Taiwan's Shangbao. He revealed that due to dissatisfaction with the rampant corruption in the military, some junior officers in certain military regions are reportedly plotting a coup, hoping to emulate the 1911 Wuchang uprising that overthrew the Qing dynasty, and are waiting for the right moment to act.